Jerusalem was likely already teeming with pilgrims from all over the known world in the holy city for the Passover, when Jesus instructed two of his disciples to procure a donkey and a colt, and to let anyone who asks about it know that the Lord needs them. Jesus is heading to Jerusalem, his eyes firmly fixed on the coming trial. And yet Jesus is not satisfied to simply sneak into the city anonymously. His ministry, his proclamation of the kingdom of heaven, his blessings and sayings that redefine what it means to be a kingdom, all culminate in this act. A definitive and powerful political and theological statement, all aimed at the empire. In a word, Jesus orchestrates his own entrance into Jerusalem because he wants the empire to know that I am here. And those who were cured by Jesus, those who were cared for by Jesus, and those who heard Jesus pronounce blessings on them, gave him a royal reception. That's right. Jesus comes riding into the city on a donkey, a beast of burden. And all of these people give him a royal reception. They spread their cloaks on the donkey and on the colt and on the road. Others who didn't have cloaks cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road or waved them as Jesus rode by. They shouted, "Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord." They affirm that this is the true ruler. This is the one who redefines what it means to be king. And they join in affirming this political and theological statement that Jesus is making. This is the new sovereign, with a different kind of reign in mind. A humble servant leader who blesses the meek, who blesses those who mourn, who blesses the poor in spirit, who blesses those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, who blesses those who are persecuted. Oh, this is the fulfillment of prophecy. The fulfillment of a prophecy of a messianic king claiming the throne, not with an army, not with a war horse, but with meekness and humility. Matthew then reports that the city was in turmoil. And before the parade passes by, everybody is going to have to figure out what all this means and who Jesus is. Are they celebrating him in anticipation of God's victory over the empire, or are they praising the one who comes from God because he cured them, he saved them, he blessed them? Maybe it's a mix of both. But there were some who didn't quite get the message, so they asked, "Who is this?" And there were others who thought they understood the message. They replied, "Oh, this is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth in Galilee." Oh, everything they think they know is incomplete. And all that revelry and celebration, nobody seems to pause to consider just how quickly things can change. Given that this theological and political statement that Jesus is making is aimed straight at the empire, surely this challenge and this parody of the empire will be costly. In all the celebration of triumph and victory, the disciples themselves forgot that on 3 occasions, Jesus told them that he would be condemned to death. 3 occasions he told them he would be mocked, flogged, and crucified. And yet they were celebrating. Some of those testifying that this is the prophet Jesus forgot Jesus' lament over Jerusalem as the city that kills the prophet. Oh, but it was a parade. You see, this journey with Jesus includes both victory and despair. But sometimes we just want to wallow in the victory and give no thought to the despair. As jubilant and triumphant as this parade is, when the shouts cease and the branches wither, the reality is that Jesus and those anticipating the triumph of God's reign will have to endure the cross. It's coming. And there's nothing they can do to stop it. Oh yeah, there is reason for poor, marginalized people to celebrate and shout hosannas. Jesus had redefined for their good what it meant to be king, to be an empire, to be blessed by God. The signs were also there that Jesus was ushering in something different than what they may have expected. No, you see, even as they were celebrating, there was no actual military or political victory. Rome was still in control. Even with Jesus' liberating gospel, Rome's oppression and domination remained. And yet the people celebrated and cried out, "Save us!" Because Jesus was doing something that I think was more political and theological than they could even grasp. Jesus made God present. It didn't matter how strong Rome was. It didn't almost matter how oppressive they could have been, but the victory was already secure. Jesus had made God present. God was with them. Oh, I get it. Here, the revelers don't know what we know. See, we know too much. We know too much. We got the whole story. They got a Bible that tells us what the end. We can skip to the end. We know. But the revelers don't know. They don't know that a week that begins with a parade will end in a sham trial and a crucifixion. That even as they shout and testify and celebrate their salvation, torment and death have already been set in motion. Before the parade passes by, the stage has been set for the empire to retaliate violently and viciously. And that's been making me think. This whole scene of Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem, this whole scene of all of these people who have experienced his ministry, celebrating and shouting Hosanna, talking about a new age, a new day, it's got me thinking about how dangerous, though, it can be to let the triumphalism, our religious triumphalism, cloud just how winding the road to victory can be. And it's especially dangerous. It's especially for religious folk to go around making political and theological claims about pandemics as if death is not real, as if there is no cross to bear. During this COVID-19 crisis has been Christian churches who have allowed a triumphant political and theological interpretation of the times to cause them to endanger the health and lives of their people for some theatrical display of faith. The news has been filled with stories of churches and religious leaders continuing to meet in large gatherings against the advice of medical experts and claiming victory over COVID-19, even as more and more people get infected and die. This is a theology of triumphalism. Let me put it this way. There's been too much premature preaching of resurrection, as if there has yet to be no cross and no death in our future. There's too much preaching resurrection before we've even gotten to the foot of the cross. Oh, I know. Trust me, I know. Some of these people will remind me that we sing the victory in Jesus, victory in Jesus, victory in Jesus. Oh, I love that song. They would tell us we know that Jesus conquered death, hell, and the grave, so we've got a right to claim victory over death and this disease. I've heard more than one person say, God is in control. I've heard some of those pastors continuing to gather their people in worship ask, where is your faith? But I wonder if the message of Jesus' counter procession into Jerusalem with this affirmation as Jesus as the anointed one of God, as Jesus as the fulfillment of a sovereign in the line of David, I wonder if it is not a theology of triumph, but a theology of presence. That no matter what happens, that in Jerusalem, a place both of celebration and death, that Jesus is who he was prophesied to be. Emmanuel, God with us. That during this time of a spread of a global pandemic, our witness should not be a victory or triumph that pretends that this disease is not deadly, or that it can't touch us, or that it'll be okay. Rather, perhaps that a more liberating and salvific testimony is that in the midst of a deadly disease, God is with us. That God will bear this cross with us. That God will lead us through this. That as Jesus goes to the cross, God is with him. And as we bear this cross, God is with us. So what should our posture be in the middle of this pandemic? Especially when we know the promise and victory of resurrection. It's forever in us. Like I said, we know too much. We got a lot of information, more so than the people in Matthew. We got information. But what should our posture be in the middle of this pandemic when we know the promise and victory of resurrection? The answer to that question came to me, believe it or not. I tend to go to the musical theater. And the song, every time I think of the triumphal entry, I think about the song from the musical Hello, Dolly. The song is Before the Parade Passes By. And this musical is about Dolly. Dolly is a widow who spends her time matchmaking for other people, not looking at her own life. She's trying to put people together for marriages and for romance. But she's watching a parade, and she finally realizes that she shouldn't take the revelry and the celebration of a parade for granted. Rather, during the merriment, she resolves to live a life of reason and rhythm, to prepare herself for a full life during the parade, so that when the parade is over, her life will continue to sing no matter what comes. And perhaps that is why we shout Hosanna. Not a theology of triumph that we've overcome already, but a theology of presence where we celebrate Emmanuel. Not because doing so will forestall death and despair, but we shout Hosanna to the one who is to come, because when death and despair come, we know that God is with us. That is my prayer and hope for you today. That in the middle of this storm, that God is with you and calms your fear and soothes your doubt in the middle of the storm. May it be so. Amen.